Today I'm sharing 4 banking ETFs that have beat the S&P 500 over the last 3 years. When Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank collapsed and went under the control of the FDIC, there was a lot of fear in the banking industry. But as a result of all this, banking ETFs as well as bank individual stocks have seen yearly lows and sometimes lows that haven't been seen in the last 3 years. Now check out this chart right here. These are some of the ETFs we're going to cover, but look at all those colors going down. That massive decline happened over the last week as a result of the fears from the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. Is now the time to enter on some of these ETFs and ride the wave back up. For example, I'm going to take you back to March of 2020, and back then, of course, the pandemic started, and as a result of the pandemic, a lot of the cruise lines were closed down, and a lot of those cruise line stocks went to almost all-time lows, if not lows that haven't been seen in many, many years. One of the many stocks I decided to jump in on is Royal Caribbean Cruise stock, which I bought for an average cost of $25 per share back in March of 2020. I decided I would hold on to it for at least 1 year so I could take advantage of the lower taxes when I sold for all that profit. And as a result, I sold that stock for over $90 per share. Now, same thing here. Even though we're not dealing with a pandemic, we're dealing with some bank issues. There's a lot of fear in the banking market, and as a result, a lot of the ETFs and the bank stocks have gone down. The very first one on my list is KBE. Now, this one is the Spider S&P Bank ETF. This ETF offers a dividend yield of 3.3%, and it's been around since 2005, aiming to invest in both growth and value banking and financial industry sectors. The expense ratio for this is only 0.35%, which isn't bad at all. I try to aim for ETFs that have an expense ratio typically less than 0.6%. Some of the top holdings of this particular ETF includes banks you probably are familiar with, such as Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase & Company, Wells Fargo, and over 95 more. So when you buy this ETF, you get exposure to 98 different stocks. Now, in full transparency, I did jump into this particular ETF on the first trading day since Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. My theory is on March 13th of 2024, this should be recovered, but if you're watching in the future, you probably already know if I was right or wrong. But here I am in my Webull brokerage account. This is my investing app that I use quite frequently. Bought shares right at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the morning, and already you can see it's up $71 from my initial purchase price. I was actually not expecting that. I was expecting this to actually go down even more, but maybe the government bailout has helped with easing some of the fear in this particular sector. In any case, my hope is it's going to keep going up. In fact, if we look right here on Seeking Alpha, you can see it did come down quite a bit in the day and then shoot back up. But if we zoom out a little bit, let's go to the 1 year. Look at that sharp drop right here that happened as a result of Silicon Valley Bank. So if you look up here, it kind of hovers right around anywhere from $40 to $50 a share. So if I bought in at $36, I could tend to see some good profit. By the way, Webull is one of my favorite investing apps to use. I use this for pretty much all of my different trades. If you want to check it out and learn more, click the link in the description below. They do offer free bonuses when you get started with this app. It's commission free as well as free to download. Now, even though I am invested in 2 out of the 4 ETFs that I'm sharing in today's video, I gotta warn you that this is not financial advice to buy, hold, or sell. You got to do your own research and make your own decisions. And if you're worried about that, make sure you seek out the advice of a professional financial advisor. Now, ETF number 2 on the list is focused on regional banks. These might be the smaller banks or banks that focus on a specific region, such as a state or even in an area of a state, but they're not nationally known. The ETF ticker symbol is KRE, and it's the Spider S&P Regional Banking ETF. Of course, here you can see it right now as of the recording of this video at $44.57 a share, but also having a steep drop off as a result of Silicon Valley Bank. It does offer a nice dividend yield of 2.91% and has over $2.1 billion in assets under management. Expense ratio is again 0.35%, and you'll find some great regional banks in this particular list. Comment below if you've ever heard of any of these banks or even if you bank with one of these banks. Fifth Third Bank, Regions Financial Corp, Webster Financial, PNC Financial. Now, there are a total of 144 different companies that are inside of this ETF when you invest. Now, a little bit later, I'm going to stack up these 4 ETFs against each other as well as against the S&P 500, and we're also going to look at what would have happened in the past and what could happen in the future should you decide to invest in this particular banking sector. Third ETF on the list, we're talking about KBWB. Now, while this one is similar to the first one on the list, KBE, this one is managed by Invesco, has a 3.31% dividend yield with $2 billion in assets with a 0.35% expense ratio. Now, if we compare KBWB with KBE, you're going to see some similar holdings, but the percentage of holdings will be different. Let's take a look here at Seeking Alpha and I'll explain it. So right here we have KBE. If you click right here under holdings, you'll get a kind of a snapshot of some of their top 10 holdings. Right here we are. Of course, the total holdings, as I mentioned earlier, is 98. But let's take this Citigroup as an example. If we look at Citigroup right here, anytime that you invest into KBE, 1.7% of your total investment will go into Citigroup stock. Now, right here we are on KBWB. Let's hop over to the holdings. Thinking about Citigroup, look at the difference. Your money will be going 9.43% into Citigroup. So while there are going to be some similar holdings, as you see here with JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, things like that, the spread will be a little bit different. So even if you buy multiple ETFs, there could be an opportunity to even diversify within the same type of theme, in this case banking, amongst the different ETFs. This ETF does only hold 26 stocks, so it's a little bit less. But I also invested in this one earlier today. Let's take a look at the results here on my Webull portfolio. So here we are, KBWB, bought this right around 10:33 a.m. and up $76. Again, was not expecting this kind of growth right away. I was expecting to see red for a long period of time. And again, I'm expecting to maybe see red. We'll have to see if this maintains at that 1.85% improvement since I bought in. But in any case, the goal is we're going to wait a year. Now, the final one on the list is a Vanguard fund for those people who love Vanguard, and the ticker symbol is VFH. This one has a 2.4% dividend yield and is one of the best expense ratios at only 0.10%. Cheapest on the list. Now, this is a bigger, well-known ETF. The assets under management top a record-breaking in comparison to the four we're talking about today at $8 billion. You're also going to get exposure to a lot more in the financial sector with a total of 381 different holdings, including JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway B, Bank of America, and Charles Schwab, just to name a few, and there's over 300 different stocks. Now, the interesting thing is, let's stack these guys up against each other to see how it's trended over the last couple of years. And it's going to be interesting because we're comparing this to an ultimate downsize that has just occurred as a result of the bank collapse. I have stacked up KBE, the S&P 500 total stock market, KBWB, KRE, and VFH. Let's take a look here and compare them. And I want to point out a couple things that are really interesting. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go from price return to total return. The reason I am selecting total return is we want to take a look at all the different dividends that are reinvested back into these funds. We don't want to just look at the price alone. Price is great, it is hopefully going to rise, but you're also getting dividends, and it's good to factor that in to see what your overall view looks like. Now, what's really interesting is if you look here at the top, do you notice all the different percentages? It would kind of make it seem like, oh, these things are underperforming the S&P 500. Maybe they're not a good idea. But put the brakes on for just a second. We need to do a little bit more research. So even though you can see right there the S&P 500 over the last 3 years had a total return of 34.59% compared to, let's say, for example, KBE that only had 21.1% return. That looks bad. But remember, what's in the scope of this is this most recent, I don't want to call it a crash, but dip, pretty serious dip. As you can see it falling off the edge right over here on the far right. So what we want to look at is each one of these things individually. And how I'm going to do that is if you take your mouse cursor and you come over here on Seeking Alpha to the S&P 500, it highlights only that particular fund. Now take a look here. Look at the blue line and look at everything outside of that. Look at all of these bank funds outperforming the S&P 500. That's what I meant a little bit earlier in the video when I said these funds are indeed outperforming the S&P 500. What makes it interesting is over the last couple of days, as a result of the bank collapse, a lot of fear going on in the market, they're now underperforming. We're talking about lows that we haven't seen in the last 3 years. But if I highlight over here to the first one, you can see that one is well above, especially if you're looking right here in the middle, right? Well above S&P 500. Even better yet, we have KBWB up here between the blue, which is the S&P 500, and the KBWB. Take a look at KRE way here at the top. Those regional banks are killing it in comparison to the S&P 500 over the last 3 years. And then we have VFH, not doing as well as the other guys, but still outperforming S&P 500 by a small margin. But let's say history repeats itself. And what we'll do is we'll compare March 2020, and let's say you would have invested when the pandemic hit, and then you held it for 1 year, just like I'm going to be doing now. Investing now, I'm going to hold on until March of 2024 and see where we're at that point. So let's hop over to the portfolio visualizer and do a little bit of investigative research. So we're going to say that we invested in April of 2020 until January of 2022. We're going to put $10,000 in. Thank you, Grandma, for the $10,000 Christmas gift. We're going to invest it into KBE in this example, just for fun. I'll also put in KBWB into our second portfolio that we'll look at. And let's just look at KRE because that one's a little bit different because it's regional banks only. And we'll see how we trended if we would have invested at that particular moment. So I'm going to hit analyze the portfolios, and then right here is the example of what we're looking at. Your $10,000 investment would have grown handsomely if you would have cashed out right here at the end of January 2022. So you invested during the pandemic, everybody's freaking out, everybody's selling off, things are going down, you put your $10,000 in, and KBE has returned a total of $21,423, KBWB returning a total of $21,645, and the regional banks kicking it, giving you $23,000 total return. That's not investing any more money. That's just putting $10,000 in and letting it float over time to see what happens. So if history repeats itself, now remember, nobody knows if the market's going to go up, down, sideways, inside down, or upside down. You just got to be careful and be ready for the turbulence that occurs when you invest. But if you're still a little skeptical of the banks and you're like, yeah, what about like monthly paying dividends? What if I just want to get an ETF, it pays me monthly, and I can just build my portfolio based on monthly paying dividend ETFs? Well, if you want to check more about that, check out this video next, and we'll see you on the next video.